Today. Sorry. Um, Thanks for having me for the Lunch Learn today. My name is Jariatu Mansaray. I am the Executive Director of BlackTech Columbus here in Columbus, Ohio, and then I'm also a product consultant for Industrial Logic. That is an agile consulting agency based out of Berkeley, California, where we specialize in agile transformations and product excellence and product practice. So I should say software excellence and product practice. So been spending the past couple years leading that, and so helping teams either with their agile transformation, so how to implement agile methodology, or how to best apply product practice and product principles. Can you all hear me okay? A little.
Yes.
Okay, just getting a little bit of feedback. If you give me 1 second, I'm going to pull up the deck that I'm going to use for today, and then we can get started. Before I get started, are there any questions specifically that I should either address or speak to during the presentation? Like, are there any product questions that anyone has? I want to make sure I cover anything that people have on their minds.
Can you also tell your role in BlackTech Columbus?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So in BlackTech Columbus, I am I'm one of the co-founders. So we co-founded in 2018. And then I've been the acting executive director since 2021. So this is the second year that I've been full-time in that. Yeah. Thanks, Rainey, for the reminder. Give me 1 second. Where's this? Is this here? On road mapping. Sorry. Should have had it already pulled up. Okay, slideshow. And then I'm going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see it. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So I'll get started. Okay. Please ignore the bottom. We use this deck a lot when we're having this conversation. So essentially, the talk today is going to be around product road mapping and how to do it in a modern way. I know that product has become a very popular topic or about a very area of expertise or practice over the past few years, and everyone has their own flavor as far as how to do it, what it means. Here at Industrial Logic, we have a very specific perspective, not necessarily unique, but very specific on what product it is and how to go about practicing it. So when we talk about product road mapping, we're talking about what things that have been either consistently used and worked over time, and also some things that should be taken into consideration based on really being a product-focused organization. All right, so for the 3 basic things we're going to cover today, what road mapping usually is, what road mapping should be, and then how to do modern road mapping. So going to take you through that whole journey. We'll skip this part, sorry. All right, I already asked the questions. All right, so what road mapping usually is. There's a quote on the slide that says, road mapping is usually an unvalidated list of solutions that drive an unrealistic schedule. And anyone who has experience kind of road mapping has had that experience. So the questions so what road mapping, how it's typically used is, we're going to look at the questions that they try to answer, how it's typically done, right? And so what questions does road mapping usually try to answer, essentially? So usually it addresses what areas we're working on for a customer. So be that a specific field, acquisition, as a user error, is it raising some type of revenue? How our products will achieve our goals. So here we talk about specific products or services. So this could be a feature on an application. It could be a service that we're going to offer our user base. So specifically what we're going to do to achieve the problem that our customers are having, how long different things typically take. So is it something that's going to take 6 months? Is it going to take a year? Is it going to take 3 months? So attaching those solutions, right? So identifying specific problems, identifying problems or solutions to those problems, and then identifying a timeline for how long those solutions will take, right? Because all of, we know working in corporate environments, a lot of times our bosses will know when things are going to be ready or when things are going to be done. What is the status of the plan in current work? So meaning essentially the steps along the way, right? As you're going through and saying, if this is going to take 6 months, is it halfway ready? Is it almost ready? What are we working on? What are we still waiting on? And then lastly, it talks about when is the thing going to market. So once it's done, once this thing is done, when can we expect the next thing to hit the market and be in the hands of our customers and ideally start making us some type of revenue? So the first thing that's kind of wrong, or the first issue that we run into with this type of road mapping, is that it focuses too heavily on the solutions, right? So it focuses on a lot of assumptions, right, about what the problem is and how to solve it. And it makes decisions very early on in the product stage, of saying, this is what we're going to do to address this problem. Basically trying to say that definitively, because this problem exists, we know exactly how to solve it. And that's the course that we're going to go down on, right? And it focuses very heavily on the fact that these are the products or services that we're going to offer that are going to address these problems. And at face value, I know that probably sounds like, oh, well, like, what's wrong with that? We know exactly what's wrong. Like, we know what our customers don't like. The issue is that as much as we can make conjecture about customers' desires or customers' behavior, when living in the age of data where we can test, unless something is backed by data or backed by some type of fact or proof, it really is just an assumption, even if a lot of times the assumptions are good ones. And so what we really want to stay away from, or I should say where product roadmaps really in the past and even a lot of places now focus heavily on, is this is the thing that's going to solve our problem, right? Like, this is the feature that's going to make our customers happy. This is the thing that's going to drive more revenue. This is the thing that's going to make the pen point less, that's going to make less issue for us, or going to make the business better, right? And so we focus on that thing as like the golden ticket that's going to get us from point A to point B, or wherever it is that we're trying to go, right? And the problem with that is that when we do focus on a solution, and we do put all this weight on this thing is going to solve everything, right? Like, this specific feature, this specific service is going to solve everything, we then begin to do all this planning around it, right? So if we're going to release an app, then the app has to do all these 20 things, and all these 20 things are going to make it the best app. And mind you, a lot of time why these really are assumptions is because we're guessing about how these things are going to perform before we've actually released them or test them within a market. And so if you see just by the graphic, you start to build all of this weight on top of a single point of weakness, right? Because you're not really studying that, because you're really just guessing. Again, and guessing because we haven't put anything physical in a customer's hands, right, to get the feedback of how they're actually going to interact with it, if that's actually the thing that they wanted, right? The second problem, right, outside of the assumptions about solutioning, is time, right? So they're usually poorly organized, poorly aligned, and prioritized. And so poorly aligned can mean two things. One, being poorly aligned with the actual values or the goals of the business. And so a lot of times, if we're working in the tech space or working in the product space, what we find is that stakeholders, so like leaders in the organizations, have one set of priorities, right? Our customers, who are internal to the business, have their priorities, and then the actual user who's using the thing who's outside of the company and using the thing has another priority, right? And so a lot of times when we're taking features and we're putting them on a product roadmap, we got to consider the fact that a lot of times we're not taking our roadmaps and giving them to customers most of the time, right? Or users. We're not going to the users of our products and saying, hey, like, this is what we're building, this is when we're going to build it, this is how it's going to go. A lot of times we use roadmaps as internal tools, right? We're giving them to our managers, our directors, our VPs, our C-suite executives, and saying, hey, this is what we're doing. And because we're building it a lot of times for their consumption, we build it in a way that's comfortable for them, right? So what it ends up being, instead of a tool or how you would use a map, right, it was just to guide you based on where you want to go, it becomes a Gantt chart. It becomes this is what's going to be done and when, this is when it's going to be done and when, this is what's going to be done and when, so that people in other parts of the business can start to use that to drive marketing schedules or releases, or start to expect when certain revenue changes are going to occur, etc., communication, all of that stuff, right? And that's what we usually do. And that's what you're going to see in a lot of organizations when you look at the roadmap. People aren't looking at the roadmap because they want to know the strategic vision of the company, or because they want to know the user goal or the user value that we're driving in the company. They use the roadmap because they want to know what's going to be done and when can I plan my initiative around when this tech is going to be available, right? When is this product going to be available, or when is this service going to be available? And then another major issue, right? So road mapping is often done in a silo. A lot of times when we ask for roadmaps, when roadmaps are created, they usually ask the product person or the product team, right? And so you have a product owner, maybe a product manager, sitting down in a room, and they're looking at all the things that have been asked of them. They're looking at all of the things that everyone wants, and they're like, okay, how do we build this thing that will please everyone to an extent, right? How do we build it so that the executives are happy, that the customers inside the business are happy? Ideally, if you have a really people-centered or really product-centered product team, they'll consider the user in that. But a lot of times, since it is the business and it is executive leaders inside of your organization that's asking for a roadmap, they build the roadmap to those desires, right? And even though they're building it to those desires, once they ask, or once they get the ask, a lot of times they just kind of run with what they know, and they go to a room and you put it together and you show it, right? And maybe you show it to one or two people, but then you come back and you build it again, and you come out of the room and you show it again, right? And so the problem is, if certain teams or representation of the teams aren't in those rooms, it's very easy to misinterpret kind of what other people want, or to forget sometimes altogether what the priority of other people is, right? And kind of just build that chart to what you know or what you like, or specifically to whoever's asking you for that roadmap. And so this is how we get to this point, right? So road mapping usually involving roles without collaboration to a goal. And this is how you kind of get into the blame throw activity, right? So instead of using the roadmap as a collaborative tool with everyone, because it's built in a silo, because it's built on assumptions, when things don't go wrong, or when things when things go wrong, or things don't go as predicted, right? Like when things don't fall perfectly to the same schedule, or when the products that we have or the features that we have on the roadmap don't produce the result that we want to see, then we start to point fingers, right? We start to point fingers like, well, this person wanted that person wanted this. And a lot of that isolation, it creates a culture of mistrust within your team, or a culture of mistrust within your organization. So, and again, I don't know how closely all of you work with product in your organizations, but this is not uncommon in a lot of organizations, how they use product now, or how they've historically used product. And a lot of times, product is just used as a buzzword, or it's kind of used as a shiny word, and we're really not operating as product organizations, right? We're really operating as project organizations with a product name on top, right? So this is kind of how all of these factors lead to this culture of, it's not my fault it didn't work. This person asked for that. It's not my fault that this service wasn't profitable. This is the person who asked for it. Oh, well, I didn't really want it. This is the thing that was told to me, and I was just doing what I was asked, etc. Right? So we identify roles and responsibilities as ways to create shields for ourselves, right? To not catch the heat if all of this planning and all of the things that we planned on doing don't go the way that we wanted them to go. We'll skip the lean beer. Before I go into the road mapping should be do, are there any questions? Okay. So we talked about what road mapping should be. or road mapping currently usually is, right? And so now let's talk about what road mapping should be. So in a healthy product environment, where you're trying to build products to create value for your end user, right? That's really at the base of all product management. I know there's a lot of different, again, a lot of different perspectives, but we like to focus on creating value for the end user of the product or service. So this is kind of how we feel you should best go about practicing road mapping. So the purpose of road mapping, right? One, it should provide operational alignment and cohesion for product strategy, right? So what does that mean? That means that everyone in the organization is aligned or understands the alignment of the organization's strategic goals, right? That means from the top to the bottom, everyone understands, even if you don't necessarily agree, because I know that consensus isn't always realistic, right? But from the top to the bottom, everyone understands what the strategic goals of the product, what the strategic goals of the organization is as a whole, right? And then within each department, be within technology, be within the business, again, everyone understands and is aligned on what the strategic goals are of the organization. That product strategy, that strategy word is very, very important. A lot of times organizations will have goals because they're very easy to hit, right? Goals are like they're very set in stone. You write it down. This is the thing that we want to accomplish. Fine. A strategy is more so a game plan or it's a method of operating, right? This is how we're going to attack something. And a strategy is a little bit more flexible because sometimes the goal can move, right? Because you need to take a different path on how to achieve the thing inside of your market, right? So if generating revenue is what you want to accomplish, right, your strategy for how to generate revenue may change depending on the environment in which you're working, right? So if you, let's say, owned a lemonade stand, right, in 2019, your strategy for reaching your customer, like your goal could be, we want to sell to 100 customers every day, right? And that's a very solid goal. However, your strategy for how to achieve that would be different in the summer of 2019 than it was in the summer of 2020, because in 2020 the world was on a lockdown, right? So you couldn't just necessarily stand on a corner downtown and just expect 1,000 people to walk by for numbers to sell to 100, right? You'd have to get creative with your strategy for achieving your goal because the environment is different, right? And so that's one of the things that road mapping should provide is a guideline for how to adjust the way you conduct business or how to adjust the way you interact with your user to achieve your ultimate goal, right? And everyone should be aligned on, hey, we agree that this is the thing that we're going to try during this time frame, which is a time frame that the roadmap covers. Less so than let's do all of these things in this order. Secondly, the roadmap should help with prediction, trade-offs, and expectations. And so it should, and keyword help, right? With prediction, trade-off, and expectations. When we're talking about prediction, we're not necessarily predicting what will happen because we can never say with 100% certainty what the future is going to be. However, what we can say is that based off of the information that we have, based off of past history that we've experienced with our product and our users, this is what we think will happen should we do this thing or produce this thing, right? And so, it's important to phrase it that way because it's almost like the same way you would set up a science experiment, right? So you can say, I predict that if I add this ingredient to this vial, it's going to bubble over based on what I've seen in the past. It's the same thing with business, right? Based on the user behavior we've seen in the past, based on how our product has performed or our service has performed in the past, this is what we expect to see if we produce this product or this service in the market. And the roadmap should help with that because it should outline exactly what it is we're trying to accomplish. It's not saying that we will achieve the thing, but it is saying that this is what we're trying to accomplish with the efforts that we make over this time period, be that a quarter, again, 6 months, or a year, right? And it's not necessarily, and it's important to frame it that way because we want to make sure that we're not saying, oh, this is going to happen. What we're saying is, this is what we think is going to happen based off of the information that we have, right? And so when you get through that time frame, or even if you're halfway through that time frame and you look at the results and you're saying, You can say, man, well, results aren't really showing, the results aren't really matching what we thought would happen. It creates an opportunity not for blame, but to say, why is that? What did we miss? What did we not consider when we were making this prediction? What segment of our user base were we not considering? What part of the market were we not considering? Were we not considering now as a global pandemic? Were we not considering that our users are going to maybe another product or another service to fulfill this need? Were we not considering the fact that maybe this problem that we thought was huge for our customer wasn't that big at all, right? And so that's what we talk about prediction. It's really important that we frame it in the context of a true experiment, right? And so not just that we can always predict 100% all the time, because that's not a reality. That's never going to happen, right? Unless you get lucky, there's no science of predicting something 100% all of the time. However, what you can use prediction and experimentation as is a way to get better at reading data, a way to get better at utilizing data, and a way to get better at understanding your customer. Using predictions and experimentation as a way to get better understanding, and less so as a way to actually predict what's going on. Trade-offs. So trade-offs are important, again, like with my analogy I used before with selling lemonade before the pandemic versus after the pandemic. Sometimes, right, you can't do all the things that you would like to do. Sometimes you can't do things exactly the way you would like to do. And I know in business we run into that a lot. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we live in an uncontrolled environment, right? Like users are going to do what they want to do. Customers fall into different things. Sometimes we have budget, or sometimes we have a lot of budget and then we don't. But I say that to say it forces us as teams and organizations to make decisions about what we're going to continue with and what we're going to halt. And so use the roadmap is a tool that can help with that, because it gives us a visual guide to say, these are the things that we're prioritizing, or these are the things that we're not prioritizing, and how do we then want to go about making that decision, right? Again, because everyone should already be aligned on the strategy. Everyone should already be aligned on how we want to go about doing things. And so then the product roadmap should help by saying, if these are the things that we thought were most important, if these are the areas of our customer market or our customer segment that we wanted to impact, if this is the type of value we're trying to provide, if we can only provide some of these things, right? Or if we can only provide one or two of these things instead of all of these things, what are we going to do, right? So it should clearly lay out a visual to guide that conversation, because everyone knows exactly what it is that is the priority versus not the priority, and why, right? And then expectations. So when you should expect what and when. And I want to make the distinction between the schedule Gantt chart, as far as this feature is going to be here at the end of May, versus this year we're trying to make this. Sorry, did someone say something? Okay. I was going to check. Sorry. So we talk about expectations. Again, we're not talking about when on a calendar to expect features, right? What we're talking about is when to see certain changes in user behavior and interaction with our products and services. So it's not to say that, you should expect to have this feature live at the end of May. More so than we should expect to see a higher rate of user interaction over the next quarter, or we should expect to see an increase in revenue over the next 3 months. We should expect to see a decline in bugs or outages over the next year, right? So that's when we're shifting the perspective of expectations. Again, it's really important when we're talking about being product focused, and we're talking about focusing on the end user and the value that we're bringing them, that our expectations are also framed within the end user and what they're expecting from us as an organization. And then the last bullet point, when we talk about a mechanism for coordination, feedback, and improvement, essentially it really leads to the top one about aligning on that strategy, right? So using it to say, if we've outlined what our priorities are, if we've outlined the impact we want to have with our user in the market, based on, again, what we predicted and what we're actually seeing. Where do we need to get better? What's going really well? What's not going well? What should we keep doing? What should we change? And then how do we improve on the things that aren't going so well? Or even should we improve on the things that aren't going so well? Maybe we thought we needed 3 different features to generate more user revenue, and really we're generating more revenue off of one. Does it make sense to continue to invest resources in the other 2 features, or should we reinvest that energy or those resources into a different feature or a different area of the company to provide a different result, right? So it should create a clear and visual representation of that. Road mapping is in the middle, so it requires a product strategy and a working delivery team. So product sits, and the reason I got into product myself is because I really enjoyed the positioning of product in the business, and that it sits directly in between the business and the delivery team, right? And so the product people in the center, your product organization, your product managers, product owners should be the people that say, I hear what you want as a business, right? Like, I hear it, I get it, I understand it. Like, we see eye to eye. And I also hear and see you on the technical teams who are building and constructing and delivering the actual thing that the business wants, right? And so product is in the middle in a very sweet spot that says, how do we create cohesion between both sides? And it's really important because a lot of organizations struggle with, they struggle because there's a big disconnect between what the business wants and what the technical team can actually deliver, right? If you have a really competent technical team and they're really great at building quality products in a timely manner and getting them to market, that's fantastic. But if you don't have a business side that's good at strategizing within the market and saying, hey, as a business, as a company or organization, this is where we want to do in the market, this is how we want to position ourselves, then it's going to be really hard. And it really doesn't matter who you have to build it, right? Because what are you asking them to build, right? That's really the goal. Other end of the spectrum is you have a really great business team, right? You have a really great executives, really great leaderships, very strategic minds thinking about where they can infiltrate in the market, where they can grow and expand, and how they can, and where they want to meet users, how they want to provide value to users. But you don't have an experienced or talented or timely delivery team and your technical team, let's say maybe just don't have the level of senior experience or technical expertise in certain technologies inside your delivery team, then it really doesn't matter how great a strategy you are if you don't have a team that can deliver it. And so product sits in the middle. Product sitting in the middle is really important because as a product organization with our product team or product person within an organization, it's important that you have full clarity on both sides, right? It's important that you have clarity on where your business team is, what they're good at, what they're not so good at, and also where your delivery team is, what they're good at and what they're not so good at, so that you can create a cohesive plan for how to incorporate both, right? If you have a great strategy but not the best delivery, as a product person, it's your job to make sure, hey, using the roadmap that we are utilizing the delivery team, right, to the best ability to provide this outcome for the business, right? And it's going to look like this because of the capability of our delivery team. Or conversely, we have a really great delivery team, but our business side is not that great at strategizing. We're going to do our best to maximize the skills of the delivery team to deliver on what the business side can produce or what the business side can agree on. So being that middle, being the best part of the Oreo, is a great analogy to that. And then also theme-based roadmaps, right? It's really important that road mapping shows a flow. And a flow, really think of it like a river of water, smooth moving. And that's not to say that you're not going to run into any issues, but that is to say that you are constantly producing some type of value to your end user as the product is developed, right? And think of it more as a flow and not necessarily a step where it's like, we produce something, we wait for a period of time, we produce another thing, we wait for a period of time, we produce another thing, we wait for a period of time. No, We want to be, as product organizations, we want to be able to produce consistent value to our users, consistently improving on a process, consistently improving on an experience that our users are having with our product and services. And that's also important because consistent production also means consistent feedback, right? If we're taking 3 to 6 months to give something to our user to react to, that also means we're going 3 to 6 months in the dark. Because the information that we have, once we produce the thing, is going to be pretty much consistent from the time until we give them something else to respond to. And again, the slower feedback loop means that we get better slower, right? A theme-based roadmap should also blend discovery with delivery. So again, it's that consistent learning process, right? As you're delivering, as you're providing something for your user to use or your user to interact with, you're also learning more about your user and learning more about your market. So there should be room in the roadmap for you to actually be learning and adjust course, right, as you learn. Next, limiting WIP and understanding constraints. This is a really important one because a lot of times that organizations, again, and this is especially true if people aren't aligned on what they want to accomplish. If they're not aligned on a specific strategy, what ends up happening is you have all of these different desires, sometimes even competing desires from different parts of the organization. And so the roadmap will have 50 things on it, right? Because you want to produce 50 things for 50 different people because they all have different things that they desire, versus we talked about earlier, the organization being aligned on a specific strategy or being aligned on a specific way that focus that they want to have on a smaller amount of things, and understanding that it is that way because we do have constraints, right? Sometimes constraints is the talent of your delivery team. Sometimes constraint is the capacity of your business team. Sometimes constraints are, your budget and that you only have a certain amount of resources to allocate, right? And so you're limiting the amount of things that you're working on to the realistic constraints that your organization or that your team has. And then lastly, feedback loops, which is going back into that discovery and delivery side, which is, are there points and spaces built into your roadmap where you should naturally not only just be discovering, but being able to give feedback to the people that are actively working on the things, right? So again, if a feature is not going the way that you thought, is there space in that roadmap to say, hey, at this point, we should be able to look and see if this is being successful or if it's not. So then also our favorite word, governance. So a roadmap should support governance, right? And I know we don't like this word because it's big and it's like a heavy hammer and it's kind of a pain in everyone's side. But the reality is, for most organizations, especially larger organizations, governance is necessary, right? And a roadmap should support it, right? So it should support internal and external stakeholder analysis. It should manage dependencies. And again, that trade-offs word, it should make trade-offs. It should support, because it's aligned with all the different business needs and it's aligned with the technology capacity. It should be able to support governance efforts because it should provide a foundation for people who are in charge of governance to know who to ask what and when, right? What to expect as far as user outcomes, not necessarily off of dates or timelines on the calendar. And then these are based on flow and theme-based roadmaps. These are some key metrics that your roadmap should address in some way. So churn for experiments, like how long does it take you to learn something? How long does it take you to figure out the impact that you're having in a market? Delivery or target percentage. So again, how much of what you plan to put out are you actually putting out? You should be able to use your roadmap to outline what are the things that are constantly getting in your way when we're talking about blocks and impediments. Is it a specific team? Is it a technology? Is it something internal, external to your organization? You should be able to use your roadmap to start to identify those pain points. And then again, discovery versus throughput. How much time are you spending learning versus actually putting things out from your learning? A lot of organizations are really good at putting things out. But they're not good at learning, right? And that means that they're constantly putting things out that people don't necessarily like or that people don't necessarily find valuable. And there are some organizations that are really good at discovery. They really know their customer, they really know their market, but they're not necessarily the best at getting something out or addressing specific concerns and getting something out for users to use, right? Kind of gun shy, right? Just kind of afraid to go for it. Other things that you should also consider in key road mapping metrics are value driven versus cost driven. And this is really important, again, because a lot of times when we're talking about roadmaps, we're talking about products. It's very easy when you're inside of an organization to talk about it from the perspective of the cost, right? To talk about it from the perspective of the business. But we want to keep in mind that when we're really product driven organizations, we should be always driven by the value that we're providing the end customer, and we should be seeing cost as a constraint on the amount of value or the type of value that we can provide. Not necessarily the cost should never be our driver, but it should always be kind of like that line on the edge of the road that says, hey, you can't go out of these boundaries, just for logistics reasons, right? Then feedback, again, feedback loop is what we're doing working, is it not working, pivot or persevere. Do we keep going down this road? Again, are we going to keep going because we have more learning to do because we're not sure, or do we pivot, right? Do we pivot our strategy, using our strategy in order to find a different way or a different method to achieve our end goal? And then lastly, forecasting and capacity planning. Again, we can never 100% predict what's happening in the future with our user. I think it's harder for a lot of organizations, especially tech organizations, to accept the fact that you also cannot 100% predict what your tech team or what your delivery team is going to do. And so forecasting and capacity planning is really important. The capacity piece, to know what is realistic to ask your team to work on in a given amount of time and given their skill set, given their level of expertise. And then forecasting, not saying that something is absolutely going to be done at this time. And this is more a software excellence topic, but this is really saying, based on how the team, your delivery team, has performed in the past or is performing with current products, this is you can say with a certain percent of certainty when something will be done, right? And so again, that's not saying that this feature will be here in September. What that is saying is that based on how quickly we have performed tasks in the past, this product or this service will be, there's a 25% chance of this being ready in March, but there's a 50% chance of it being done in June, right? And when we go out to November, there's maybe an 80 or 90% chance. And so again, we're never necessarily promising because we can't predict, but we can estimate based on previous work, previous experience, how long things may or may not take. And then leaving it to the business to make decisions on how much energy they do or don't want to invest based on that gamble. But everyone understanding that it is a gamble, it is a percentage, and it's not necessarily an absolute. Any questions so far?
Yes.
Sure.
One of the things, it is very hard for many different market verticals where you're launching products to actually reach an actual user.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you have used the word business throughout, like business and product development team. Which departments within the business do you think are mostly the product development team would interact with? Customer service, sales, marketing? Like, do you see in your experience that they actually get involved?
Whew, that's a good question. Okay, let's see. So from my perspective, okay, so when I say the business, I guess I should clarify. That's a great question. When I say the business, typically, I want to say business development is typically, so I guess that would fall somewhat into sales a little bit.
Right.
But usually I'm talking from the perspective of, like, I'm trying to think about a way that I can frame this not in the current company that I work in. I'll say it like this. So within, on a true product team, there should be different representation. On true product team, there should be a representation of every area of the organization on that product team. So there should be someone who's aligned with what the operations side wants. There should be someone who represents what the marketing side wants. There should be someone who represents what the sales team wants, and then there should be there should be people who represent actually building out the thing that everyone wants. So when I refer to business, I refer to anyone who's making decisions based on things like capacity, based on things like revenue, sales, marketing, operations, and not necessarily working on the actual building of the thing, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And I make that distinction because I saw, and I'm biased as a techie myself, but I lump everyone into the business because typically the business's role is to support the actual revenue generation of the company in some area versus the building of the thing or the producing of the thing that will generate that revenue. And so that's how I in my mind draw the distinction between the business and the tech. It's this person is working for the best interest of the company, and the tech is typically working in the best interest of the actual product or the actual thing.
Right. I guess where I was going with it is that, how does the customer or the user get represented in situations where, it is hard to talk to them directly, unless you get constant feedback, which you have mentioned a few times, through the system where people, you actually have, people like a customer user group or somewhere where you can, test your product out, right?
Yeah, no, I get it. So, and I think this is where having a really solid product person or product team or product organization within the business helps a product team or product organization helps is because people like product designers, UX designers, UX researchers come in handy because they are the people who are going out and going out and talking to either test groups, user groups, doing studies, doing user interviews, doing experiment circles, and getting that type of data to say, what is it that people do and actually don't like? Because I do agree, finding users sometimes can be really hard. But I think that's where a good product strategy comes in, is based on what the business is saying they want, right? Based on what the technical teams are saying they can build. What is a wireframe? What is an MVP? What is a scenario or a series of questions or a questionnaire that we can put out to kind of start to get feedback from either the people that are actually going to be using our product or people who are aligned with the people who are going to be using our product to say that this is going to be effective or that this may or may not be effective.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
I just want to make sure Tanya is a product manager and Kelly is interested in getting in this. So just for the sake of time, if you'll have some questions you'll want to ask now, or you can type your questions in the chat and Robin can read them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kelly?
I was going to ask about forecasting and capacity planning. So a lot of, the business aspects, the individuals that you set upstream, right? They think in waterfall methodology, if you will, and they're like, here's the money, here's how much you have, it should be done. How do you help them understand that you're forecasting based off of your capacity and like your sprints, and that, if it's a 2-year project, me telling you that it's going to be an epic that's the 30-point card, which may turn into 60 points, isn't something I can tell you. How do you do that?
Great. That's a great question. Okay, so I will say that conversation is a lot easier to be had if the expectations on that type of communication are set from the beginning of a project, right? So when a business or our team first asks for a thing like, hey, this is a thing that we want, it's a lot easier to come out of the gate and saying, okay, that's fantastic. We think that's a great idea. This is how our team works, right? And a lot of times people who are not technical don't want to hear the technical jargon. They are like, as soon as you start saying terms, they're like, I can't hear it. Yep. Right? But what they can't understand is this is what our team does, right? And a nice high level overview, especially to the person that's gonna on the business side that's gonna own the project, to say, hey, this is how our team works, right? You ask for a feature, or there's a feature or an epic that needs to be done, and based on their current knowledge without having actually touched the thing, they make an estimate. Now, there are three things that can happen. We can start working on it and it's exactly how we thought, and it's going to go exactly to the timeline we thought. We can start working on it and it's way easier than we thought, and it's going to take a lot less time. Or we can start working on it and it's way harder than we thought, and it's going to take a lot more time, right? However, so giving you a hard number would be disingenuous, right? Because there's no way for us to predict the future, right? Even if we know exactly what's going on in the technology, there's personnel changes, the change in the business, all these things can happen. However, what you can count on from us is a consistent, timely update on where things are, so that you're always able to make the best decision based on the best information that we have, right? So I mean, it's never going to be a case where it's 2 weeks out and you are just now figuring out that all of these things are in different states than where we thought they were going to be. No. Whenever we find a change, you're going to know, right? And that's not necessarily to say that we're always going to be in a panic, but that is to say that this is the team works, and we're always going to be working to make sure that it's the most efficient and that we're producing the best that we can. But this is how that comes out. And so getting people used to, again, that language of there's a 20% chance, there's a 30% chance, there's an 80% chance that this could happen, right? And a lot of times people don't like that, but that consistent messaging and that consistent messaging that, hey, we're trying to produce the best that we can for you. And this is the percentage of confidence or percentage of surety we have at this time. That's what I can give to you, so that you're at least they're always ahead on. So no one's breathing down their neck and they're like, I don't know. They always know, right? And they always know because you're always informing them. Now, is that always people always super welcome to that? No, because people just want a number. But the reality is, like, if you're not, I'm not going to give you a number that I can't confidently stand behind, right? And at some point people had to bite the bullet and realize that they have to make a business decision, and they have to lean on their strategy to say, based on what we do actually know right now, what is the best course of action to move forward with?
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. That was a great question.
Kelly, Robin, Vinny, questions? Okay. Can you see the chat thread, Jariatu?
I think so.
Okay, cool.
I saw something
want to
pop
make
up.
sure. Okay. I just want to make sure, we have just about a minute left. And so, are there any takeaways you want to give us?
Yeah, essentially, I really want to emphasize on the fact that a roadmap should strategically align all parts of the business, all parts of the organization. And so when you're creating a roadmap, it's important, it's really helpful to invite other people, right, to come and look at it and to say, hey, what do you think about prioritizing this or doing this? The more collaborative a road mapping session is, the more effective and the more accurate the final product is. And then the roadmap should be a guideline. It's not a schedule, right? It's not a schedule to stick hard to. It is literally the same way you would use a map. If you're in Ohio and you want to get to Michigan, right, and 71 North is closed, then you take 68. Right? It's not to say that we're definitely going to sit on 71 and we're going to sit there no matter how much traffic there is. No, like the map is literally, it shows you like what are your options for routes to take. And sometimes if one route is more viable and if that changes, that's okay. You just change course, right? It doesn't mean that you give up. And so when you use a product roadmap in that same way, right? Like what is a user value, the user goal that we're trying to reach? It becomes a lot less stressful and a lot more helpful in all the different areas and business needs that you have in an organization or team. So it's like the major takeaway.
I think Jariatu has never gone to Michigan. 23, take 23, route 23.
I get it. My dad lives in Delaware, so I drive up that route all the time. I couldn't think of it. I'm like 68. Well, I don't know what US 68 takes me to, but it's up there. No, 23 turns into 68, doesn't it? Like up.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Okay. I know I didn't pull
all
that
right,
up out of nowhere.
That's right, you win.
No, thanks guys so much for having me. This was fantastic.
Vinny?
Well, thank you all for joining us. If you'd like to become a Zeta Star, feel free to check out our website and get access to more exclusive content. Our next Lunch and Learn will be 3 weeks from today in August. And you can feel free to register on that as well on our website. Otherwise, it was great having you, Jariatu. Thank you so much for presenting, and this was fantastic. Take care, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Bye.